I would like to thank Rocky View Schools for this opportunity to talk with you about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is neurobiological, highly genetic, and affects all demographics of society. Anywhere from 5 to 12% of Canadian children have ADHD, which is approximately 1 to 3 students in every classroom. ADHD is not something that magically disappears in adulthood. In fact, if your child has ADHD, you probably do too. It is a complex condition with 3 core symptoms of inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity, which can be physical, mental, or verbal. ADHD accompanies learning disabilities and other mental health conditions up to 80% of the time, and is often at the root of addiction, which can be as diverse as the people who have it. The polarity of addiction as a symptom of ADHD can be shown in this example. It may be to a drug, which, in the worst case scenario, is a tortured soul who lives on the streets and dies alone. We generally recognize this type of addiction and the costs it incurs. But ADHD may also present as an addiction of being driven to achieve at all costs. So while the degrees earned or promotions at work may look like success, the divorce, personal bankruptcy, or charges of dangerous driving, for example, would suggest otherwise. While it can be said ADHD is a difference in cognition, there are also differences in behavior and emotion. There's a tendency for people to get hung up on the name without taking the time to understand the symptoms. ADHD continues to be contained in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual with very good reason. Yet its name seems to evoke a sense of incredulity. While I agree there is a tapestry of humanity and that we should not label everything, we cannot simply dismiss mental health conditions out of turn when we don't understand how severely they can affect people's lives. It is astounding to me why ADHD continues to be regarded as fictitious or blamed entirely on bad parenting, poor teaching, or video games. Like the glurge that is circulated in social media, otherwise intelligent people are predominantly consuming information on ADHD from non-scientific sources. And so the myths of ADHD and junk science are perpetuated. ADHD has been around as long as humans have been and has undergone various name changes through the last couple of centuries. It was once called a defect of moral control. It has been suggested ADHD be called attention dysregulation disorder, but regardless of the name, we need to understand the symptoms and the consequences of leaving them untreated. The stark, cold, scientific facts are these. Untreated ADHD statistically increases the odds of teen pregnancy, STIs, self-harm, bullying, incomplete education, disordered eating, employment difficulties, incarceration, car crashes, divorce, and suicide. Adding to the risk is that variables like personality, intelligence, and sex makes the expression of ADHD symptoms look very different person to person, and therefore more difficult to identify and accurately diagnose. In fact, 90% of adults who have ADHD don't know they have it. In turn, they are unlikely to accept treatment for their ADHD-diagnosed children because of the profound embarrassment and shame they feel. The lack of willingness to seek or accept a diagnosis of ADHD is based on the commonly held view of society. And I posit the view educators hold of ADHD will be instrumental to improving the mental health and life outcomes of all Canadians. As a high school guidance counselor, I have read thousands of cumulative files that contain personal and academic histories. I find similar patterns between the students who have been diagnosed with ADHD to those who are struggling but not yet referred. In those files, I may find speech and language support in the early years, along with vision and hearing testing, a change in programming from French immersion to English, early literacy support, issues with asthma or allergies. In the teen years, I'm likely to find suspension or expulsion notices for defiance, smoking on school property, possession of drugs, vandalism, or fighting. I may find referrals to eating disorder clinics, references made to cutting, or safety plans from treatment facilities. Often I find divorce decrees, custody or foster care orders, reference to adoption, and multiple school placements. Interestingly, a pattern of parents in the military, policing, emergency medical services, government law, technology, or teaching appears. Sadly, I may also read that a parent has been incarcerated, referred to as addict, or died by suicide. Teacher comments are the most telling and may include, needs considerable support to excite interest in schoolwork, needs to increase on-task behaviors, socializes too much in class, not meeting expectations, but is quite capable, problems with assignment completion, speaks without thinking, difficulties with peers, cries or angers easily, messy locker and desk, daydreams. These anecdotal comments are invaluable pieces of documentation which can be used by trained clinicians as part of the diagnostic evaluation. I encourage teachers to formally report on student struggles and, with parents, continue striving to find the root cause. The worst situation is when it seems every possible issue has been ruled out, and so the children are then blamed for their behavior. Please do be careful to describe the behavior. Don't moralize on it, for this is when the truly debilitating part of ADHD sets in. The cycle of shame and blame seeps into the psyche, is terribly damaging to self-esteem, and can lead to serious mental illness. A further worry is when a parent ignores a thorough psychoeducational assessment that includes a diagnosis of ADHD, because I have seen firsthand the toll this decision takes. Even more concerning is when medication for anxiety or depression is sought because, in the mind of the parent, either seems a more credible diagnosis. This could not be further from the truth. ADHD is one of the most validated and most treatable diagnoses in the DSM. It is called the diabetes of psychiatry, with good reason. I do not profess to understand all things pharmaceutical, but when a young person is started on medications deemed by Health Canada to be inappropriate for children and youth, I am alarmed. While in extreme cases these medications may save lives, I do have to question the frequency with which I see them being dispensed. A small dose of a stimulant can yield incredibly positive change for an individual with ADHD, as shown by these brain scans. But antidepressants have to be given at higher doses for youth than adults to achieve the same level of efficacy. Accepting a diagnosis of any kind can be difficult, But misleading doctors and medicating for something the youth doesn't have is downright dangerous. Now, this isn't to say that depression and anxiety aren't necessarily part of the issue. While a diagnosis of a particular mental illness might be made in the teen years or young adulthood, ADHD is frequently not considered as the primary or even comorbid condition. When the ADHD is not accounted for, it's as good as a misdiagnosis and can lead to full-blown depression for many years. The suffering continues because the complex interplay of the two conditions is not being fully addressed, which leads to a greater likelihood of self-medicating with nicotine or drugs. Unfortunately, this is shown time and again in the tabloids with celebrities who battle addiction, a mental illness, and what may likely be undiagnosed ADHD. Corey Monteith is a recent and regrettable example. Countless Canadians suffer similarly because ADHD is regarded by society in general as the laughingstock of the DSM, and we need to help change this. Celebrities are huge stigma busters. When they courageously share their diagnoses, they inspire confidence and a belief in self. Adam Levine of Maroon 5 has talked candidly about his ADHD, and he was the first celebrity role model our daughters had. They love his music and the fact that he has ADHD just like them. Along with ADHD, both of our daughters have been diagnosed with a learning disability of written expression. I have been studying ADHD for 2.5 years, and I learn more each day. My knowledge gap was enormous. And here's where the real risks associated with ADHD become even more troublesome. Even though ADHD is the most prevalent childhood mental health condition in Canada, teachers don't learn about it in university, and doctors generally don't study ADHD in med school or while on their clinical rounds. Incredibly, it has been only in the last 3 years that psychiatrists in Canada have been expected to have knowledge of adult ADHD for their board exams. This leaves a huge chasm for our school-age population with ADHD and leads to negative consequences for all of society. As children and youth spend far more time with teachers than medical professionals, we are poised to make a life-changing difference for our young fellow citizens. Teachers need to be educated on ADHD and know the signs and symptoms to watch for. But we cannot do it alone. Teachers and parents need highly trained medical professionals to refer to when concerns arise. The science of ADHD conclusively demonstrates time and again that not only can untreated ADHD cause untold misery for individuals and families, it has a negative ripple effect on all of society with higher costs to education, healthcare, labor, social services, and the justice system. Official recognition of ADHD as an illness of significant cost to our provincial and federal governments and their ministries is essential. Ministries must educate themselves on the role ADHD plays in their services, find ways to implement services required, and increase interdisciplinary and interministerial cooperation to reduce the huge socioeconomic costs. October is ADHD Awareness Month and was recognized by the United States Senate in 2004. No such recognition has occurred in Canada at the federal or even provincial level. This Thanksgiving, October 14th, the first day of ADHD Awareness Week, I give thanks to the city of Airdrie for being the first city in Alberta, second only to Vancouver, British Columbia, to proclaim ADHD Awareness Week. These are the only 2 cities in Canada to have made such proclamations. We need to focus our attention and urge our governments to focus on this mental health condition with the urgency it deserves. Get real, get informed, share the message, please. Thank you.